Welcome to A Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach with Mark Gellard and Candy Reed, sponsored by the ERT 300. Well, hello everyone. Delighted to say on this edition of Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach, the one and only Andrea Petkovic, Petco, joins us. I am so happy.
I'm so happy to see you, Candy. I will tell you that at one point I will have to leave because I have theater tickets to the matinee. Ooh. And it's with Paul Mescal, and I love you very much, but I love Paul Mescal more than you. So I hope that's okay. You don't take it as an insult.
You love Paul Mescal more than me. I am slightly insulted. He's a great actor, Gladiator 2, of course. And I think, who is he going out with? Oh, is he going out with Gracie Abrams?
Yes. Good. Hey, you're good in your pop culture knowledge.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Gosh, well, okay, I'll give you that. What is he in?
So it's a streetcar named Desire, and they were playing it at the West End in London, I guess. And it was so successful that they brought it to New York, and it's in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn. So I'm going to head to the train at one point and sit while the sun is shining outside. I'll sit in a dark theater and for 3 hours. I'm not sure it was the greatest choice in my life, but it was a choice.
It's a good choice. I've actually got Devils Wear Prada tickets coming up, and also the one that Kate Blanchett is in, The Seagull, which are very hard to get. So that's coming up for me. So we'll have to switch notes. But let's get off that subject and onto the subject that we brought you on here for, which is to talk about boys. No, just joking. Let's talk about tennis, because I'd love to start with the fact that you were an excellent tennis player, and I would call myself a failed tennis player. So I'm in awe of anyone essentially gets to the top 100, let alone the top 20, which you did. But you've also made a very seamless transition to broadcasting, which for many of us is very unfair that you're so talented. Why is this?
That's really funny. Well, it's funny that you say that, because my perception of why I'm good in broadcasting is because I view myself also as a failed tennis player. And that might sound, well, I will explain it. Give me 1 second to explain it. Of course, if you look at my resume and you see I was top 10, it sounds all very, very grand. And I had a very successful career. I'm not saying that I didn't. But when I was a child, I think all of us, when we were children, we wanted to win Grand Slams and we wanted to be the number one in the world. And so when I was number 9 in the world, I didn't see the 91 players that were ranked behind me. I only saw the 8 women that were in front of me, and I did everything I could to sort of close the gap, and I was never able to do so. So I viewed myself in a way as a failed tennis player, and I always watched them very closely and what they were doing better than me, what they were doing differently in the important moments, and when crunch time came along. And so that's why I thought I could bring something to the broadcast, because I always felt like if Serena, for example, not that she couldn't do it, she could probably do it just fine, but I always thought she couldn't understand the normal mistakes normal human beings do, because she's a superhuman, she would just be like, why can't they just make it? So I always feel like I bring that of having competed with the best, but also having failed against the best. And I think that mixture makes it easier for me to see things on the court. And then another thing which helps me now is I was not the most instinctual tennis player. It was a lot of hard work. I watched a lot of tape. I was very keen on tactics and game plans, and I mostly did them myself with the communication of my coach. But I was very keen on that, and I think those tactical things of my game that I brought when I was still playing now helped me in broadcasting. But I feel very flattered, Candy, that you called me talented. That's very nice of you. Thank you.
I'll stop with the superlatives now, because we don't want your
my head to swell too much.
Exactly. I actually remember I was thinking about this in preparation, but the first time I sort of met you, and it wasn't a formal meeting, but I think CNN had sent me to the Toronto tournament to go and interview Stacey Alistair, and we spent the whole day with Stacey. I absolutely talked her ear off and asked her so many questions, but we were interviewing her, and I remember you were in the media room, and you kind of had a really nice conversation with her, because she obviously felt really comfortable with you. And I think your personality really stood out because I don't know if you're a fan of Absolutely Fabulous, the British comedy show. I was very much a fan. But one of my favourite lines is sports personality of the year, contradiction in terms. Because not that many, I think it's very funny, not that many sports people have these amazing personalities. And I will give you another compliment because you do. I absolutely love it when I see you. I know a lot of people feel the same way. It's sort of this exuberance, this fun, this joyfulness. You've got a lot of character to you. Have you always had that? Is something that's developed over time?
Well, I will say that it was probably the smallest when I was playing tennis. So I don't think I don't think you don't have to have personality to make it as a sports person. I do think that it's connected, that most sports people come. So my biggest fear in life, really in life, is that Carlos Alcaraz will lose his joy for tennis. That's my biggest fear, because yours too, right? Because it's just the thing, when I see him play, it reminds me of why I started playing tennis in the first place, because it was fun and it was joyful and it was a great time. And that's why I started playing. And then when you start to become successful and people start to watch and they start to comment on what you do and what you maybe do wrong, you start to doubt yourself and you start to tone everything down. And I was lucky I was able to keep it behind the scenes, but many people who would meet me in real life would be like, oh, you're so much different than on the tennis court, or you're so much different than the image I had of you. And I do think that a lot of players, I don't know exactly for other athletes, because I think in team sports, it is different. You have to tone your personality down to fit into a team and a system, right? In individual sports, you need to have something unique to break through. And I do think a lot of players with time tone it down. And my hope is always for them that they can keep it in their private sphere with their group, with their team. Rafa, for example, is a great example. When you saw him amongst his Spanish friends and teammates, he was so loud and happy, and they were joking around and playing cards and yelling at each other. And then when he had to speak English or was on court, he was more closed off, right? And I think over the years, fans still got glimpses of his personality, but it's very rare that you have somebody like Roger who can kind of connect both personality on the court and off the court. And so this is my biggest fear in life, that Carlos Alcaraz will tone his personality down. Please, God, don't let this happen. We need him. We need him.
I know, because a lot of people say, oh, well, he needs to focus more. But actually, anybody would buy a ticket, wouldn't they, for Carlos Alcaraz? Because he's so exciting. You never know what's going to happen. There's this big grin. And he may hit a drop shot which hits before the net. He may hit an outlandishly good one, but you just don't want him to lose that. So I completely understand, and I hope that he never changes. That brings us, I suppose, seamlessly on from what you've said. I've just watched the Belinda Bencic podcast interview on Tennis Insider Club, which I'm sure you've watched as well, and the Darren Cahill one. And the thing that I thought was so good about her, and I know she's actually coached by my ex-coach, Ian Hughes, who I worked with from about 13 to 17. He came from football. And he wasn't a tennis guy at all, but he's become probably Britain's most popular and successful coach, particularly on the women's side. And so I'd love to know more about that, because you talked about sort of being a failed tennis player and seeing the game from a different view. But what Belinda Bencic said, I thought was so interesting, was tennis players generally are psycho, because tennis brings out the psycho side of them. I was a psycho, absolutely. And I think I'm pretty relaxed and calm off court. What about you?
Yeah, the same. I think there are more extreme. I mean, absolutely, 100%. I think there are more extreme versions of a split personality on and off the court. Somebody like Alize Cornet comes to mind, or Laura Siegemund Candy. We call the match together of Laura's. Yeah. And you were like, oh my God, she's so intense on court. And I was like, yeah, she's actually one of the funnest person off the court. You were like, really? So I think the splits can be more extreme and less extreme, but there are splits. And oftentimes I tell people when they say to me, oh, I really don't like this player XYZ because I saw them do something on court, I always tell them, you have to imagine it, as we were talking about theater, you have to imagine it like a persona that they bring on court. There are parts of themselves in it, but it's really a mask they are wearing on the court to be able to play their best tennis, whether that is an angry mask like John McEnroe, or whether that is a warrior mask like Arina Sabalenka, who comes out on court and has this incredible charisma of competitiveness around her, or whether that is somebody like who is a good example, somebody like Roger, in a way, who has such a poker face that you can rarely see anything, or Novak Djokovic, who seems very angry on court, and it seems like he almost needs that anger to play his best, but off the court he's one of the most gentle creatures you'll ever meet. So I do think that we have to stop thinking that the tennis player we see on court is necessarily the 360 of their personality. I do think it's a little bit like theater, where they bring a certain persona on court with them that can make them play the best. But you mentioned Belinda. A lot of people are surprised how quickly she came back to her best. And I'm a little bit surprised, but then again, I kind of expected her to play better after her baby break, just because I knew her so well before. We practiced a lot together. We played millions of matches against each other. And for me, the one thing that always stood in her way was her perfectionism and how hard she was on herself. She would miss one shot and freak out completely, not understanding how she could possibly have missed that shot. And I haven't had a baby myself, but I've been around Angie Kerber. I've been around my sister who had a baby recently. And I do think the one thing a child in your life does is give you perspective. And that's why I was not completely surprised that Belinda found her tennis so quickly again, because it was never the talent that was lacking. It was only that harshness on herself. I mean, you've seen her plenty of time where one single shot can derail her for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, she's certainly lost that. You could see that she still has those perfectionist levels, but she's learned to sort of accept that she may not be brilliant all the time. And this year, 2025, she is being brilliant. At the time of recording, she's beaten Coco Gauff, which is the best win she's had in a couple of years. Your thoughts on Coco? I'd love to know, because I personally feel, and this may be a little controversial, that she should go away with a really good technical coach for 3 to 6 months and just rejig the forehand. I think she's so young that she's got too much time, and I think she's going to win multiple majors if she does that. But I'm a little worried if she doesn't. Your thoughts?
Well, it's really interesting, because I have this is very anecdotal. I did not make a scientific experiment, but I do have the feeling that everybody I talk to in tennis who comes from a coaching perspective, like you've coached for a long time. You see tennis through a lens of coaching. Renee Stubbs, who I sometimes am on her podcast, she is very much through a coaching perspective. And everyone that I speak to that looks at tennis from a coaching perspective says exactly the same thing. She should take a couple of months. She should work on her grip or on the forehand, whatever it is, on the technical aspects of her game, and then come back and win everything, which she always gets these runs, right? Like at the end of last year, she had the streak where she could barely lose a match. And I'm very much still a player. And it terrifies me to hear that. If somebody told me like, hey, Andrea, let's go out for 4 months and change your grip on your forehand, I would sit in the corner and cry for 3 days. And then maybe I would come around. But I think it's so interesting to me to see that split. And I'm getting around to that. I think the further I am away from my own playing career, I see things a bit more neutral, but there is still 60% of a tennis player in me that I get like anxiety and a panicky feeling when you tell me like, shouldn't she go away and change her grip on the forehand again? But what if it doesn't work out? And I think the reason I say that is I spoke to Martin Keimer, who had a very negative experience with that. I don't know how many of your listeners and viewers watch golf, but Martin Keimer was one of the best golfers. He was the number 1 in the world. He won the US Open, and he never played well in Augusta, which is basically the golf's Wimbledon, the very most traditional tournament to win. And he never played well there. So I don't play golf, so I don't know if I use exactly the right terms, but apparently Augusta is leaning a different way than the golf courses usually do. Right. And the way his swing goes the other way. Yes. And so his swing was more was more fitting for the other courses. And he changed his swing to be able to perform well in Augusta. And he kind of messed up his game. He was off his game for a few years, never came back to being number one in the world, never won a major again. And it sort of derailed his whole career. And so that's, I think, like a warning sign in the back of my mind. What if it goes wrong? But again, I am German and I am very, as you can see, negative minded. So I'm like, what if it's the worst case scenario? And I love that you, Candy, you look at it as the best case scenario. What if she comes back and wins 10 to 15 Grand Slam tournaments? So I think it's just two worldviews colliding here, you and me. I'm the negative German one and you're the positive British one.
Funny enough, though, I've asked a lot of coaches on this podcast whether they would change it, and none of them had said yes. They'd all said they'd work with what she's got. Yeah, everyone. Okay. So from Dave McPherson, I'm not sure if I asked Brian Shelton. It's an interesting one, though. We'll see what she decides to do. I just think there's a little panic that set into her eyes. We saw it against Navarro at Wimbledon last year, and we've seen it at Indian Wells, which is, of course, the time of recording. What do you think makes a good coach? Can you go over your coaching during your career and what each of them brought to the table and perhaps what they missed out?
So I think the best coaches that I've worked with are they are basically a different coach with every single player they work with, right? They can individually adapt to every single tennis player, just as much as a tennis player has to adapt to every single tournament that has different conditions and different challenges that it brings with them, different balls. It's the only sport where we basically change the sport every single week from the ground up. And there are some coaches, they are not necessarily bad, not at all bad, I would say, but there are some coaches who have an idea of the game and they bring this idea of the game to the player. And if it fits, it's the best fit ever. And if it doesn't fit, it can go catastrophically wrong. And I do think because I was always very opinionated and I always like to do my own prep, I was never somebody, because you have these players that kind of want to just play. And it's mostly the players that have this instinct in them already and they just want to play and they give the preparation all to the coach. You see the coach doing their grips, you see them preparing the waters and the electrolytes and everything. They bring the rackets to the stringer. And I was more of a control freak myself. I wanted to, bring the rackets to the stringer and I wanted to have spoken to the stringer myself. I did my own grips. I prepared my own matches. So I think, for me, being opinionated, having my own kind of view on the sport, I needed somebody that was adaptable and that didn't have a very rigid view of how the game should work. We would crash most of the time if that was the case and go separate ways very quickly. But the adaptable coaches I worked really well with, because once they convinced me with how they see the sport and even if we were in different opinions, those were mostly very long partnerships. And for example, the coach I worked with for the longest, Peter Popovich, we were together for almost 8 years in total. We worked at the very beginning of my career, and I ended my career with him as well. And in between, every time I did work with the coach, it was mostly longer relationships that ended twice because the coach got a baby and didn't want to travel anymore. So, which is kind of a good sign, right? Once I am, or both, once I find my person, I am very loyal and I accept different kinds of opinions, but it takes a while. So either my coaching relationships would end very quickly, or they would last for a very long time until something else came along, like ending your career, for example.
Yeah, that's a good one. Did you? I don't know if you saw the Darren Cahill one with Caroline Garcia on her podcast, and he was talking about a coach really shouldn't be with a player for more than 4 years because otherwise they become a manager. And the other thing that popped out to me about that interview was he said there's the technical, the tactical, and the emotional side. And if a coach says, I'm great at all three, run a mile because no one's good at all three. Do you agree with that?
That's really cool that he said. I haven't seen it, but this sounds really interesting. I would love to see it after we finish here. But I always thought, so I love speaking to Darren, and what I love about him is exactly what comes through in this quote that you just mentioned. He is not a know-it-all, he sometimes asks you questions, and I always approach it from a way of Darren is one of the best coaches in the world, maybe the best coach in the world. So I always want to learn from him. But he would never just answer a question of yours. He will always ask you back, and what do you think? And and so it's very interesting to me to have somebody that is widely considered the best in his craft to want to learn as well. And I think that's what makes him the best in the end, that he does want to learn as well, and that he that he is very much a student of the game. And I don't know about the 4 years, it depends a little bit also, I think, in what stage of the career the tennis player is in. Like, I would agree, if you have somebody that's 29 and the technique is set and there's just so much you can do, is different than having a Coco Gauff, for example, who's only 20, even though she's been around for so long, but she's only 20 years old, and you have still so much potential that you can work with. Then you might need more than 4 years. I don't know, but yeah, I think it's interesting that he has this. I think how he sees the game, and this is very interesting. He sees it as a thing that is malleable and that changes every day. And there are others that see the game as like, this is tennis, and this is what's always been the case in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and today. And I think those coaches are slowly falling out of fashion, if you want to say.
Yeah, I think he is definitely one of the best. He just has this sort of confidence about him, doesn't he? That you would, if he said something to you, you would think about it and think, yeah, that's absolutely true, which also I think makes him a great commentator. I actually ball girled for Darren Cahill a long time ago. And well, the reason I remember this was because I was a ball girl and I was standing next to one of the line judges, and the line judges fainted on me. And he was a large man, and I was sort of a 13-year-old, very skinny, sort of 5'10", 5'11" girl. And this chap just sort of fell on me, and I didn't know what I think I told Darren that when I met him, but that was a memorable moment for me. You've just interviewed Boris Becker, and I'd love to know more about that, because he, of course, was somewhat of a super coach, wasn't he, with Novak? He's recently coached Holger Rune. Is he coming back on tour anytime soon?
Well, I think he would like to, but this is the thing with Boris, and what I really like about him. He has very strong. So he likes to work with challenging players, right? He likes to work with players where everyone has said, "Oh, this is impossible. They are too whatever opinionated. There's too many people around them. Blah blah blah." He likes that kind of challenge. So he's already looking for complicated players in the first place. But then when he comes in, he wants certain things to really be his way. And not in a sense like what I just talked about in terms of the game, but in terms of the team and the environment. He's very much about team and environment, like which people are in your environment before you go out to play a Grand Slam semifinal. Who is in your ear? What do you read? What do you think about? All of these things need to be put into place. And when he sees people in the environment that are not conducive to that strategy, he wants them out. And because he's a super coach, as you said, he doesn't need jobs in that regard. He will not accept anything less. So if he says, I don't want this person to be around you before a semifinal of a Grand Slam, and the player doesn't adhere or doesn't agree with that, he will be out. And so I do think he would be willing to come back, but I do think a few things need to fall into place for him to actually do come back, because he's very strict in that regard. And that's what is so interesting. I didn't know that before I talked to him frequently, that he is so strict about the surroundings, but very gentle in the game. Like, he's willing to hear you out, and he's willing to change his opinion, and he's willing to to adapt to you. But then when it comes to the team and the surrounding, he's like, no, this is what we need to do. And I know, because I've done it wrong, I've done it right. And so this is what I think you need to win a major title. Yeah. And that was very interesting, speaking to him about that.
Talking about German legends, we've got a graphic, if you're watching on YouTube, about you becoming the first German female tennis player ranked inside the top 10 since Steffi Graf in 1999. And we know from other players and coaches from Germany, including Torben Beltz, who was on our podcast at the beginning of this year after Eva Lees had such a great Australian Open. There's so much pressure on German players in Germany just because of the history. Did you find that when you were playing?
I did. I think it was worse for Angie Kerber just because she was closer to winning majors. Although I will say when I got into the top 10, for me, it was very clear that it's going to be tough and it's going to take a lot to win a major title just because I had played the best in the world. And there was Serena, there was Venus still at her best. Caroline Wozniacki was number one. Vika Azarenka was playing well. Petra Kvitova. So there were a lot of players around me that were slightly better than me. So I knew it would take. I knew I could win a major title, but I also knew a few things would have to fall into place for me. A draw would have to open up. I would have to have one of the top players, maybe not on their best day. So I knew this. I was very realistic about these things. But obviously the Germans or the German media landscape was not, because they were not following tennis in those intricate ways. They were just like, oh, she's top 10. Now she has to win majors because remember what happened with Steffi. And that when that never happened to me, you're very much, or differently put, my career was always, it was interesting when you started the podcast, my career was always viewed as much more successful in the international kind of tennis community rather than at home in Germany, because I was compared to first Steffi and then Angie won a few Grand Slams as well. And so I was always like kind of viewed as mediocre, which is okay. But internationally, I always got a lot more respect because I was in the top 10 for quite some time. And I did beat a lot of top 10 players. But yeah, that's the tough part. On the other hand, only quality gets their respect in Germany, which I also appreciate in a way.
You're quite instrumental and influential, aren't you, in the German landscape at the moment? If you could just tell everybody kind of what that is at the moment, where you're working with quite a few younger players.
Well, I'm a mentor at the German Tennis Federation for the players between 16 and 22. Eva is like, just last year she was still in my department, but now she's almost too old. Although I still go watch her matches, and I'm still there if she needs me. I don't really separate there who's 21, who's 22, who's 20, whatever, I don't really care. But yeah, it was so interesting. So I would never call myself a coach because I've never done anything remotely coaching wise, but I love to share my experiences that I had from being around top players. And it's not only things that I individually did, but also things that I've seen top players do. And because I was always, I write a lot. So I was always a writer in a sense that I was always observing what's happening around me. So I'm trying to use that knowledge and give it to the younger players and see them never use it and do the same mistakes I did, because that's what young people do.
Brian Shelton said something very interesting when he came on the podcast. He said, because I was asking him about his career, and I remember watching him at Wimbledon, and he said, actually, when I'm speaking, the players listen more when I talk about my failures on the tour.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because they actually resonate with that rather than all the successes he had, of which he had a lot.
I do think it's a weird thing in tennis because we mostly lose. I think that's a very different way of playing a sport than, let's say, when you're a soccer player who plays in a league and every Saturday there is a game and you can win, you can lose, but you can also play a tie. And then even when you lose, you haven't really lost, right? Because you're still in the league. You're still in the run for something, unless you get relegated. In tennis, it's very different. Every tournament you play, you go home with a loss, most of the tournaments. So let's take my career. I will take two careers that I usually take as an example. Let's take my career. I was number 9 in the world. I made a bunch of quarters at major tournaments. I made the semis at the French Open. I won 7 titles. I played 16 years on tour. So I played 16 years, let's say 20 tournaments a year, and only 7 times in those 16 years did I go home with the trophy in my bag, and I was the last woman standing, and I hadn't lost the last match I played, right? And now if somebody says, well, Andrea's career wasn't as great, let's take Angie's career. She was the number 1 in the world. She won a silver medal at the Olympic Games. She's a 3-time major champion. Angie has won 13 titles. She played tennis for 19 years. So only 13 times did she go home with a trophy. This girl was number one in the world. She's one of the defining tennis players of the last 2 decades. And only 13 times did she go home and hadn't lost a match. And I think it shapes the psychology of a tennis player, and it makes us different to other sports. It's more about losing and how you handle losses than it's about winning, because you lose so much. And I think that's why Brian really hit the nail on the head with what he said, because even though we don't know, subconsciously and unconsciously, tennis players react more to losses because we experience them every week and we don't want to. So anything that can help us to sort of avoid the loss as long as we can, we will, the ears will peer up and it will be like, what's the secret here?
I need to listen to this. That's brilliant. Yeah, that's such a good way of putting it. Absolutely. Now, you are the director of excitement, I believe, for the Berlin Open. And I'd love you to tell me more about this. It's a perfect fit. And also, I have an idea. I'm just putting up this next graphic because we know that Ons Jabeur is the Minister of Happiness. And I wondered if we could have sort of a fun wrestling match between the Director of Excitement and the Minister of Happiness. How do you think that would go?
I love that. I think I would absolutely lose to Ons because she doesn't have a bad day. I'm a director of excitement. I will excite for 7 days and then I will crush hard and just, sit in the corner and cry myself to sleep 2 days. Ons never has a bad day. She is always happy and she is just the most magnificent person on the tour when you meet her, no matter. And she's one of I will say Petra Kvitova also has that talent, let's say, that with Petra and Ons, you can not tell when you meet, like 10 minutes after their match has finished and you see them in the locker room, you cannot tell whether they have lost or won. And you can tell.
Wow.
You can tell with everybody else. You just need one look. It's really funny. This, Candy, when you're walking off the court and you see one of your friends and they're like, just
don't
like
talk to them. Don't make eye contact.
Really cautiously asking you, did you win? Did you lose?
Oh,
and with Petra and with Ons, you can never tell. They are always just in such a good mood, or in Petra's instance, she's just always very mellow, very gentle, and it's a joy to see them. It really puts some perspective into your own drama when you lose and you're just like throwing rackets in the locker room.
Getting the noose. Ugh.
Yeah.
So what is your exact role as the Director of Excitement? What are you going to do? Can you share any plans?
Well, I am working on the Players' Party right now. I really wanted to be in one of the very, very important things for a tennis tournament.
I'll take a ticket for that, please.
Yeah. Said no one ever. But I think what I'm trying to do in Berlin is a tough city for a tennis tournament. It's a huge city. It's the only really world international city we have in Germany. And so it has a lot of competition. There's beautiful art and theater and culinary and all of that. And so making your way as a tennis tournament and staying there is not easy. So I think I'm just trying to kind of connect the Berlin spirit with the tournament, build it into the community. I know a lot of people obviously there, so hopefully I can just integrate it more into the art and and all the cool people in Berlin. I want them to want to come to the tournament, and basically that's all I'm there for, and to of course bring the excitement as the director of excitement.
You are going to be so exciting. I can't wait. And I think last year Jessie Pegula saved championship points, didn't she, to beat Anna Kalinskaya in the final, because I commentated on that match, and it is a brilliant grass court tournament. So there's going to be a huge amount of excitement. Now, I'm aware that Paul Mescal is calling your name. So let's finish here.
Hear him? Can you hear him?
I can. Petko. He's British, so we can do it in the same accent. In Indian Wells, which is at the time of recording, that's the tournament we're covering, a lot of the players are being asked about their road trip guests. So I would like to put this to you. So Jessie Pegula, for instance, picked Des Kravchuk, Maddie Keys, and can't remember one other. And Mira Andreeva picked Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova Andrei Rublev, and Daria Kazatkina. So who would be your 3 road trip guests? You can do it from your career or from the current crop. I don't mind.
Okay.
I'll be driving, by the way.
Okay, you'll be driving. Okay, got it. So I would definitely have Angie Kerber with me because we're still friends. We still hang out when we get the chance. I would definitely have Jelena Jankovic with us because she's the most fun a person can possibly be. And she always brings the drama, which is the best when you want to have a good time. And so I have one more, right? I feel like it should be a boy. So oh, you know what? I'm just gonna go with, because I'm speaking to you, I'm gonna go with Jack Draper. I was very impressed with him for, first of all, how he handled the occasion against Taylor Fritz. He played brilliantly. And I'm also always very impressed with his ATP bio. If you've ever read it, it's very funny. I think involuntarily so, but to me, it reads very funny.
In what way?
It's just like, it's so, I don't know, he's like, I think his favorite band is Oasis, and but he has, I think, a rap song that is his favorite song. It's like kind of all over the place. I love it.
All right, I'm going to have to ask that. His childhood coach is a guy called Justin Shering, who's sort of the head of the Surrey Tennis Organisation, which is what I work for. So I'll be asking Justin more about that. What about the playlist? Who are you listening to in the car?
Oh, that's a good. So I think as Jelena and me are obviously the players or the people in the car who have the loudest voices, we will probably win the fight over the radio, and it will be turbo folk from Serbia, from the Balkans, and until most of you will leave the car and leave us stranded in the desert.
I think Jack Draper's out.
Yeah, he's out, and on the first red light, he's out.
It's like 3 women and this, no chance. Are you singing, or are you just kind of nodding your head to the music?
Oh no, we are. I wouldn't call it singing, but yelling. Yes, we are yelling along to the music. Yes,
something familiar. Right, I'm going to finish on this one because this is a quote that I wrote down, and the question was, why didn't you become a coach? And your answer was, I actually wanted to travel a little less and be at home more. Given that I see you in all parts of the world, Australia, at last year's Paris Olympic Games, at the US Open, continue. Just explain what's happened since retirement, please.
Yeah, like how has that worked out for you, the traveling less and being at home more? Not well. I'm not gonna lie. It hasn't worked out well for me. I'm still traveling, and still strangely along the lines of the tennis tour. But I will say I'm definitely always there until the end of a tournament, which definitely wasn't the case before. And I can pick and choose a little bit better rather than on tour. So that's definitely better. And I do, as a coach, you have to basically be on the road every week, and I do have weeks off. Like now I was 2 weeks in New York, which was really nice. And so it is better than being a coach, but it's still not traveling a lot less and be at home more.
So no chance of becoming a full-time coach?
I never like to say never, because you never know. Maybe at one point there's something that's really interesting to me, but in this moment right now, no, just because I wouldn't. So I know always what I think I see on the court and what could help in the moment, but I wouldn't know how to transfer that on the court and go out there and be like, okay, this is the exercises that we have to do for you to be a better whatever, to have to play the forehand with more spin. And I think that's actually the work of a coach. We think the work of a coach is sitting on the sidelines and clapping and saying like, come on now, serve wide. But that's like 1% of the actual work of the coach.
I was just on a coaching course because in England, like everywhere else, you have to keep up your coaching qualifications in order to be insured and stuff. And I think so much of coaching also, though, is bringing some life and happiness to the player and making it fun. And that was what Ian Hughes did to me. I was coming back from shoulder surgery at 13 when I started working with him. And I just remember loving the game more than I'd loved it before. And I couldn't wait to go and play. And that was just so important to me. So we're talking about sometimes, all the tactical and the spin rate. And actually, is the player enjoying themselves? Are they having a good time out there?
That is a great point. Well, you can definitely hire me as the director of excitement for your team. I would be happy to oblige as such. The work on court, you will need an assistant coach for that, though.
Perfect. Well, as Darren said, nobody has it all. And
yes,
on that
exactly.
bombshell, we shall leave it. Andrea Petkovic, you've been wonderful, a superstar. I love you to death. I think you're a brilliant broadcaster, and I thought you were a brilliant tennis player. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Candy. This was so much fun.
Thank you for watching Diary of a Professional Tennis Coach. Please like, subscribe and share, and we'll be back soon with another great episode.